There was a time where I saw myself quite poorly, and quite frankly, there's still some little struggle with this that comes in and out at times. I've had multiple identities in my life. One of those identities was seeing myself almost as in a monastic light, as a spiritual seeker. Another identity I had was very much that I needed to be a people pleaser all the time, that I always needed to be on and in service to others constantly. And therefore, I needed to neglect or abandon myself in order to be always on and always there for others. I had such a low view of myself that I felt I really needed to be very self sacrificial, that I needed to overgive and overextend myself in order to be worthy of just having a low, like just living my life in order to be worthy of life or in order to be worthy of having at least a basic low income level. My value, my view of myself, my identity was very much tied to how I looked in the world, how I was perceived by others, how others perceived me. I had very little conception of my own intrinsic value and self-worth at the time. I definitely wasn't being authentic or true to myself when I had this very strong ingrained identity. And this identity very much came from the way I was shaped in childhood. It grew out of growing up in a household with at least one narcissistic parent and another rather weak, very self involved, slightly narcissistic as well parent, but more so very weak and codependent parent who was quite selfish at times, but less selfish than the narcissist. And also, that other parent modeled for me how to be that overgiver, that people pleaser identity. My mother, in particular, was a very strong people pleaser, and she felt that her only value came from what she could give or offer to others, how much of herself, how much of her life force she could just give away, oftentimes without any expectation or any reciprocal. She actually had an expectation that she would be seen as good and she would be liked and accepted. So that was very much her expectation. But she wasn't doing this from a higher place. This people pleaser identity for my mother very much came from a place of needing, like very much from a place of compulsively needing other people's approval, other people's validation all the time, needing to feel like she was a really good person. But under that, she was actually quite a very broken person in a lot of ways. Her identity was very weak. She thought the worst of herself, and that really came out later on in her life. Even more, it was there, it was apparent behind the closed doors of our household. She didn't show that side as much to, or if at all, to her friends and more extended family. She tried to always put on that face of, I'm here. What can I do for you? How can I help? How can I overextend, overgive of myself in order to have you think really well of me and talk really well of me and really like me and just think I'm a great person? It was exhausting to witness that. She just didn't have a strong frame in and of herself. She didn't have much, if any at all, self respect. She had a lot of codependent patterns and traits, and she had a very low sense of self worth. And later on in life, that came out even more starkly with this aging that happened early on in her life, in her early 60s. Usually, those types of conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's don't happen until your 70s or 80s. And in her case, it started in her very early 60s. And I do believe that a lot of the reasoning behind her disease coming so early when she's really just beginning her senior years, which for a lot of people can be a really great time because you at age 60ish, you're looking forward to the next 20, 30, maybe 40 or up to 50 years if you're really lucky years of having some time to really do what you want to do and be retired and enjoy life in a new way without having certain expectations of you that you maybe would have had as a working individual. But for a lot of people, that isn't the case. And for her, that wasn't the case. So she did retire, but pretty much coinciding with her retirement, this disease happened and just grew over the next 6, 7 years until that was it. Nonetheless, it's important to be aware that our identity, our mind state, very much creates how we see ourselves. Our identity is very much connected to who we feel ourselves to be. It shows what we are committed to. It shows what we value. It shows who we see ourselves as, and it creates our reality. And in a lot of cases, if our view of ourselves is one that's very limited, one that's very self depreciating, one that has our identity so tightly tied to, and our self worth so tightly tied to what we're able to perform, our output, how we're viewed by other people, by friends, by family, by our coworkers, by our bosses, and we don't have a strong frame for ourselves, a strong identity that's apart from how other people see us, because ultimately we really can't control how other people see us. So it's important to realize that our identity really does create our reality. And it can also attract certain circumstances, certain outcomes that we really would rather not experience to us. Whereas if we really had shifted our identity to something that we actually do desire, to see ourselves in a brighter light, to see ourselves as fully capable, to feel like that we have intrinsic value in and of ourselves, apart from how others perceive us, because some people are going to naturally be drawn to us and like us as we are, and other people, no matter how much you try and try to people please even, there are still going to be people who don't like you. And yes, it is true, if you are not aligned with a people pleaser identity, there is a greater likelihood that you will polarize some people, but you'll actually find out who is really meant to be in your orbit, who will stay and like you and love you for you just as you are, versus who was just there because you were playing a certain role, right? You were playing a certain identity that wasn't authentic to yourself. So that's an important thing to see and ask yourself, do you really want to keep those people in your life? Thank you for listening. Have a great day.